Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I'm going to update you on how my Corrupting Fever Gladiator League start went. It's now the end of week 1 and a lot of people have been asking how it went, would I recommend it, and is it an option for you to reroll into? Well, I'm here to give you guys all the answers, but of course first, if you aren't already subscribed to the channel, we're close to 60k, and chuck this video a like if you like this one specifically. Without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so the last time you heard me talk about Corrupting Fever Gladiator in any big kind of conversation was when I was deciding that I wasn't too sure on whether I could recommend it to everyone, as it might have a bit of trouble with bossing as well as gear acquisition. Well, I'm here to tell you the bossing was just fine. I did it on an absolute shoestring budget and acquired my 2 void stones on day 1, and then I was able to purchase carries off of other boss killers which are plentiful this league for the rest. So there's no issues in that department. You won't be stuck on your progression as long as you're willing to purchase some carries for stuff like Maven and Uberelda off of some other players, which isn't too hard. On the other front though, I was a little bit worried about gearing because, you know, okay, some of the influence stuff was gone, and now the actual amulet craft to be able to transition into bows is gone as well. Well, overall, the gearing in terms of actually crafting the bow and all sorts of stuff like that is actually completely fine. It's not that expensive, and the damage loss which you get from not having, you know, an insane +2 amulet is negligible. Now, of course, overall, that's all well and dandy. Everything is quite cheap for this build because not too many people seem to be playing it, so it actually makes it a extremely budget-friendly build. I'm fairly confident you could put together something similar to what you're seeing in the background here, minus Headhunter, for about under 10 exalts and farm Eater of Worlds altered up maps with either Legion, Breach, Expedition, or anything of your choosing. You won't be able to do the full Delirium Mirror farming juice or anything like that until you have quite good gear and you swap over to bows for it to feel really good. Of course, you could do it with stuff like Blunderbore, I understand that, but overall I think under 10x for T16s and you're probably looking pretty damn good. Let's talk about the amulet craft though, because that was a big point in which you were able to go and swap over to bows. You were able to basically ignore your mana costs and just go straight to the moon and link everything up and get a level 29 Corrupting Fever and not worry about it. Well, there's some new technology out which allows you to forego the need for the amulet craft, even though they've said that they're going to add it straight back in. You know, they're taking their time with that, but you know, it is what it is. I'll talk about that technology at the end of this video, and we'll talk a little bit about what I'm thinking about in terms of the bow swap. But what I want to talk about here is what you're seeing in the background. You're seeing Corrupting Fever, but with wands. And a lot of people have noticed that I've been staying on wands for, you know, the better part of a week now. And overall, the reason for that is that going to bows is going to, you know, increase the budget tremendously. It's also going to, you know, be a little bit more demanding of your gear. And what I mean by that is you need to start investing in projectile speed, number of projectiles. You've got all of your damage loaded onto Corrupting Fever. You need to do stuff like the mana management in terms of, like, you know, either getting the amulet or the technology we'll talk about later. And overall, it comes at the cost of something. You're not investing into something else, and that something else was defense. Now, I am a big fan of defense these days, especially with these new altered up maps. I am not a big fan of dying constantly to the altered maps as well as to the Arch Nemesis monsters. So I've been experimenting and playing around with a lot of the Eldritch crafting, which I'm sure if you're interested you can check out my previous 2 videos, and I've been looking into how I can fit as much defense into this build as possible without sacrificing too much damage or quality of life. And I'm happy to report that this build now, on a reasonably low budget, can reach 100% chance to avoid ailments as well as 100% spell suppression, really without much cost of any of the damage, which makes it one of the most tanky speed clear characters I think around, which is fantastic. Let's dive in game and I'll give you guys a bit of a closer look. Okay, so again, we're focusing on the wand version here. We'll talk a little bit about the bow version later on, but as overall, I can pretty much 100% recommend this if you've got, you know, about a 10x budget and you're willing to get into, you know, kind of crafting a bit of the gear yourself, and you know, you can kind of pick it up and you're okay with this kind of a playstyle. So let's dive in. So the main thing here, I still am wearing a ton of my league start items. So my wands are from day 1. All you really need on the wands is fizz.multi and +1 fizz spells, and then you're pretty much good to go. You can see my wand still has fire res on it. If you can get attack speed on it, it's going to make your clear a little bit smoother, but that's not really necessary. So I got those 2 wands. They're very similar overall. And then the other thing which you're going to need, which is basically the only other thing you're going to need, is going to be a vulnerability on hit ring, which is going to juice your damage up a lot. And finally, the Ashes of the Stars. So that all pretty much comes to, you know, anywhere between 2 to 3x worth of gear for the most part, which is very, very cheap. Overall, it's not going to cost you much. And then the only other thing you need to get really, really started is going to be your clusters, which, you know, they definitely are probably going to be a little bit more, probably about another 4 or 5x. But that's pretty much it. Once you get the clusters, everything else is, you know, few chaos. So you can pick up any 6-link. You can even use like a tabular to 6-link your kinetic blast, and pretty much the rest of it is good to go. It's pretty much easy peasy, and you'll be able to do T16 maps no problem. Now, the thing that you're going to want to have to invest in, and why I'm spending so much time on wands, is to build a really strong foundational defense level on all of my gear pieces. I've spent a lot of money making sure that all my gear is really, really defensive and ready, so that when I swap to bows and I have all of the damage, I'm basically just a juggernaut. I can't die, and I'm going to be really, really tanky, as well as have high damage. So overall, I kind of wanted to go over a few of the pieces. If you're interested in crafting any of this gear, again, check out my last 2 videos. These boots specifically, I go over how to craft them step by step, and we'll talk a little bit about it overall. Okay, so the goal of CF is to be tanky, move fast, and clear fast, while also having some bossing potential after you swap to bows. And that's all really, really easily doable, plus more in the new expansion. So in terms of the spell suppression, being able to hit the cap where we couldn't before, instead of going for pesky Conqueror items, which didn't really have much for us, now we're going for Eldritch items, which has a lot more for us. So we have chance to avoid ailments, as well as the options to get up to 6 really high tier modifiers on the core item pool. So you can see how I have I have over 50% chance to avoid ailments, which when combined with my chest and swapping around an anoint, I'm gonna have 100% chance to avoid ailments, which is insane quality of life in Delirium, as well as general mapping, as well as against the altars, because a lot of those give the monster's chance to inflict ailments like shock, as well as like stuff like chilled ground and stuff like that. It's insane quality of life. And then I also am going to have 100% chance to suppress spell damage. Due to the fact I'm using 4 Eldritch items, it's incredibly easy to get spell suppression on all of these slots, and you'll eventually have 100% spell suppress. In addition to that, you also gain more easy access to mana reservation efficiency in the form of Ashes of the Stars, which is now the new premier amulet for Corrupting Fever, definitely a very good one, as well as the helmets that you're able to now craft with Eldritch crafting. So you can get 9% increased mana reservation efficiency on helmets, as well as a further 10% from the essence, giving you a 19% reservation efficiency helmet, which is incredibly powerful. And anyone who's played CF in the past will know one of the more expensive parts is trying to fit all the auras. You'd either need an elevated Maven helmet, or you would need like a level 4 Enlighten, or a combination of the two, which made it a lot harder and a lot more expensive to play, meaning the overall budget of even the endgame CF build has come down dramatically. Combine that with the cheap price of like stuff like wards, exalted orbs, and the bases are quite cheap, and everything's quite cheap, honestly, and overall the build has just become a lot more affordable, a lot more powerful, and a lot more defensive. So it's absolutely something I could recommend if you're not willing to fork out the massive currency required to make an Omniscience Ranger. It's probably one of the better options. Okay, so let's dive into a few of the other little bits of interesting tech that I've got here going on the build, and things that I've changed since last time. So again, of course, I'm a Wonder right now. I recommend staying Wonder for as long as possible until you get as many pieces as you can. But then once you get the juice, you're still fully able to swap over to bows and absolutely tear it up. How is that possible without the new amulet craft? Well, enter Anomalous Corrupting Fever. So Anomalous Corrupting Fever essentially says at 20% you gain 10% reduced life cost. Now when you pair that with Ashes of the Stars, you get a further 30% quality at maximum level. So this one has 30% quality, which is going to give you a further 15% reduced life cost, which is going to be 25% reduced life cost of the Corrupting Fever gem. And this is interesting because it actually stacks additively with things on the tree. So if you get, for example, the Life Mastery, 15% reduced life cost of skills, now it's 40%. And if you go ahead and take all of the Tireless Wheel, for example, that's a further 9, 6, 15%. So now, okay, what's that? You're at 25 plus 15, 40, 15% additional on top of that. That's 55%. And then in addition to that, you can also take the wheel down here, the cannibalistic right, which is going to give you a further 18%. So you can see how it really stacks up, and it additively works a little bit like mana reservation efficiency, to the point in which your corrupting fever costs basically nothing, and you're able to run it on a 6th link with a pretty reasonably low life pool, which overall is going to completely omit the need for the amulet craft. Now, of course, we are losing a bit of damage by losing out on the Conqueror amulet, but it's at the cost of a far cheaper budget and a lot more quality of life. You don't have to wait for the focus, you don't even have to have that on your bar anymore, and overall, you're also getting a ton of mana reservation efficiency on your Onyx amulet here, which can be focused on something else, like for example, running skitterbots or other quality of life auras, like maybe potentially you can even fit in Grace, which would be quite powerful as well. Now, some of the damage is of course made up by that extra aura, but it is also made up by the rest of your gear. So for example, you can now quite easily get physical damage over time multiplier on your gloves, as well as a suite of very defensive modifiers. Now previously you could go for stuff like Cull, as well as other things on these gloves, plus 1 frenzy charge, but it would be at the cost of an extreme amount of defense and quality of life. Now this isn't something I'm interested in anymore. I'm much more interested in defense, and after playing with about 4 million DPS and doing wave 30 Simulacrum last league, I'm fairly confident you don't need anywhere close to 10 million DPS on this build, unless you're literally trying to speed clear Simulacrums, which in my opinion is probably best suited more to a Skeleton Mage build, and you should probably play to the strengths of your build, which is going to be speed mapping and perhaps Delirium mirror farming once you get the bows online. So overall, you're going to make up most of the damage that you lose with a +2 amulet through your gear. You can also much easily acquire a very high damage chest piece. I think you actually get a bit of a net gain in terms of your damage if you take increased effective auras as well as pride. So if you combine everything together, you're going to be pretty much at a net neutral on your damage, and now you're getting the Ashes of the Stars, which is way cheaper, as well as a ton of other quality of life in 100% spell suppression as 100% avoid ailments. Now, I did mention 100% avoid ailments, so once I get my mana reservation efficiency helmet on, there's a little bit of gear Tetris I'm playing here, because I'm prepping for the bow build while also playing wands. But once I get all the Tetris done, I'm going to re-anoint my amulet with crystal skin on the tree here, which is going to give me my final 20% avoid ailments to be fully avoid ailment capped. And then I will also respec some points into getting prismatic skin, giving me a massive amount of max res. I think I'm going to be at a total of something close to 90 max res when all is said and done. It's going to be pretty insane, and this build just suddenly became one of the tankiest mappers around, which is reasonably affordable as well, assuming you're willing to do some of the crafting yourself, which creates a pretty interesting combo and package. And it's also a league start candidate, so you can literally take this build from Twilight Strand all the way through, do most of the content yourself with the exception of some of the endgame bosses. Gear it up piece by piece, and what you're getting at the end of it is a very effective, fast speed mapper capable of doing all bosses in the game, as well as being some of the most defensive in the game as well. So it's overall pretty damn good. And in addition to that, it can also run every map modifier. And with the new low occurrence rate of Val Temple rolling on T16 maps with Val Orbs, that's incredibly important. And overall, it's going to make this an absolute powerhouse of a build. In addition to that, you also have the flexibility of using a Stygian Vice if you wanted to roll a really crazy one of those, a Headhunter, or even a Mage Blood, capable of using all of the high-end belts, which is really, really good. And it's pretty good, but it can't, the only downside of this build is it can't be pushed. It can't be pushed past like the 10 mil kind of DPS point very easily, and getting it past that point is probably going to be worth it to kind of look at a next build. But as a kind of Swiss Army knife utility build, which is capable of everything and is very tanky, and one that you could easily get to 100 yourself once you get all the gear on, I would highly recommend it. So overall, obviously I'm singing the praises of Corrupting Fever here. I think that most people who have, invested some time and currency into it and really taken the time to kind of make sure they nurture their gear and, bring it up, have had an absolute blast with it. And even as a wander, it feels absolutely fantastic. After hundreds of maps, I'm still ready to play more. It's a very fun play style, and overall, hopefully you guys enjoyed this bit of an overview, and I'm confident to say that there will be a fully edited, fully, min-maxed guide of this build, Twilight Strand, again, endgame gear, the full journey available, as I believe this build is timeless. Even if it received numerical nerfs, it's fine. As it now is capable of existing without the amulet craft, I'm fully comfortable recommending it and creating a guide for it, and hopefully it will live on into the future for many leagues to come. So if you enjoyed this video, this bit of a sneak peek and a snapshot of what Grim's doing, make sure to check out a thumbs up. But until next time, cheers.